Hey everyone, welcome back to yet another episode of GenAI Vlog. So this past couple of episodes, we've been talking about Anthropic Claude API solutions in a sense that we're building cool applications with leveraging advanced AI models in the market provided by Anthropic. So let me remind you previously, we discussed how to build this continuous chat interface using a multi-tool chat manager. So if you look into the code, the chat manager that we discussed before has a custom function that retrieves article from Wikipedia, has another custom function that conducts a Google search with live internet. And you can essentially ask any question you want. It will recognize the question, understand the intent, and use the correct tool to conduct the tool calling. Once it gets the response back, it will use that content to augment the final answer. So previously, we've been talking about this while loop to allow us to conduct continuous chat conversation with this manager. So all that's being done, it's ready, and we have a good understanding of how this system works. Now, the problem is this article sometimes being very long, especially when it's in the final response, it's being very long and very difficult to dissect what's going on in this final answer. And as you can imagine, if downstream, if you were to collect this data somewhere outside in a different database, for post-training or whatever, or history management for user to enhance user experience, you get the idea that it is very difficult to parse out this giant paragraph or this giant string, right? Because if you look at what we talked about previously, um, if I say latest weather in Westchester, New York, it will just give you basically a bullet point of giant list. And then you kind of have to dissect that a little bit. You have to post processing, things like that. If the topic is different, but within the same conversation stream, maybe here instead of weather, now I'm talking about Tom Holland, and it recognizes that it's conducting a search on Wikipedia, then it gives you a different content. And here, as you can see, the output is relatively unstructured, right? These are just random paragraphs. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about how to design a workflow in a way that this response is relatively structured in a sense that we want to say exactly what I want to say, and the response will give us that information. So post-processing, it makes our life much easier. So with that being said, let's jump right in. First things first, we install Anthropic. That gives us the package. Then we get the API key in there. Then we have this giant chat manager, right? It's a updated version from the previous module, and it has the Pydantic compatibility. So here you see that I'm importing base model from Pydantic, and I have a input validator here for this particular tool, right? Article search. And this article search input is a class object that's inherited from base model from Pydantic. So this essentially coins a structure to have a search term, and that's it. A search term is defined using the field, which is a structure imported from Pydantic. You get the idea, right? Now I can do the same with web search. So web search input, I am enforcing that input to follow the particular schema by defining this class object this way. So it's inherited from base model from Pydantic, and it has one input, this topic, and that's it. So the input of both of the tools that I'm about to use, the structure is enforced. Now we can also enforce the output structure, right? The output structure, we can use similar strategy. We can say the tool result is inheritance of base model, and it always has these four information. It has success, content, error message, if any, right? It can be none if there's no errors, and timestamp. Timestamp, you can kind of think about it as datetime, so you can use that as a type hint. So if we do things this way, and if this tool is being invoked, the output will always have these four pieces of information. So that makes our life easier if downstream we want to save the output of this response of this particular tool call in our database so that we know that this is a tool that users like to use. This is the piece of information that allows us to create that database because it is structured. Same thing that can be used for article result, web search, things like that. So you get the idea, right? These are just decorators. They are class objects inherited from Pydantic-based model, and we can enforce the input-output of the tools if the tools is being used. That's it, right? That's it. And then same thing, right? The conversation management, we can also have the base model here to allow us to enforce the structure, right? If it's a type, let's enforce that. If it's text, let's enforce that. Things like that, right? Same goes with conversation message. It's also inherited from base model. So everything that you see in this module is enhanced with Pydantic compatibility. So that's the highlight of this episode. And I'm not going to go too deep into the logic of this function because previously we already had the episode discussed step by step what the manager is like in the chat management function. And let me scroll all the way down to the final example. So here are all of the bells and whistles that's enhanced with base model compatibility using Pydantic. And that's all. And that's really it. So with that being said, now let's get the tools in there, right? The custom tool get article that is from the Wikipedia package. It enables a Wikipedia content search, right? That's the Python function. And then Google search that enables Google search. That's the Python function. Here I'm using Serve API as the provider, right? Now everything is ready. I can provide the client. Is the Claude client from Anthropic. And then here, this manager that I'm talking about before and also in this episode is defined here on line 2. The structure is the same. The only difference between this Create Multi-Tool Chat Manager from previous episode that we used before, the only difference is the input and output are enhanced with Pydantic-based model, and we enforce the structure of the input and output of this class object. So when you're talking to it, we know exactly what it's supposed to say, right? So for example, tell me Python programming. It will tell us Python programming, but it will tell us Python programming according to certain schema, right? So it's still going to say the article, right? It's very long, and obviously post-process is not easy, but down here, you can see that there's Python, there's success, there's tool use, there's response time, things like that. These are the information that we ask it to provide us, right? So if I go up to the tool structure, you can see that here in the structure, we have success content, error message, timestamp, things like that. So this structure is enforced. Now let me run a live example just to show you how this works. So I can run a live example with a continuous chat interface in this while loop. And then let me say latest news about Tesla, robo taxi, something like that. We all know that it will probably grab information from internet, right? Because this is more like a internet search than from Wikipedia. So it recognizes that web search. That's great. Invoke that tool, which is great. That's what we wanted. And then it gets a response back in the message. So here's update. Here's the paragraphs. Current service in Austin, Texas, right? June 22nd. That's what we all know, right? Also, that's exactly what we want. And in the end, we have success, tools, response, right? Things like that. And then in the final response, I will just print out the content. But in terms of what the tool has produced for us, you can see that the output is structured. So there you go. To finish this up, obviously, you say quit, and now we'll finish this block of cell. So hopefully this framework provides a sophisticated setup. If you want to have tool calling, if you want to have structure output, tool management, things like that, all the bells and whistles are provided here. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like.